As you're seeing, Congress leaders protesting outside the Herald House, and this after the Enforcement Directorate conducted raids at the Herald House and also multiple locations that were linked to the National Herald newspaper. The Congress, of course, calls it targeting of the opposition, and they say that if the Enforcement Directorate had any proof, this case would have been pursued earlier, this case would have ended earlier, and the evidence would have come out. They call it targeting, unreasonable targeting of Congress President Sonia Gandhi and also Rahul Gandhi. And as you can see, they're raising slogans right outside the Herald office at the Herald House, where the Enforcement Directorate started questioning right this morning. This came after Sonia Gandhi and Rahul Gandhi were both questioned. Last week, Sonia Gandhi was questioned for close to 3 days, and she was questioned for nearly 12 hours after Rahul Gandhi was also questioned for 5 days. After that, today we saw the Herald House being raided by the Enforcement Directorate. That is the National Herald main office. And we can see now Congress leaders are protesting against this, and they say that they're being targeted. Opposition leaders are being targeted by central agencies, and the central agencies are in fact being used against the opposition in selective action. There you can see some tussle as well between the protesters and between the police as the protests are continuing outside the Herald House after ED raids there. Now, to give you some background, the case is of the National Herald newspaper that the Congress is related to, and this money laundering case was launched by the Enforcement Directorate in relation to the National Herald newspaper, and the Enforcement Directorate is raiding around 12 locations, including the offices of the National Herald newspaper in Delhi and several other premises linked to the Associate Journals Limited. The Gandhis are being investigated in what is called the National Herald case that involves the Young India's takeover of Associated Journals Limited. This is the company that runs the National Herald newspaper, which was founded by India's first Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru. The Enforcement Directorate says that Young India also took over 800 crore in assets of AJL. So those protests currently going on, and Let's in fact get a reaction from the Congress party on this. Mr. Harshpreet Singh Khadial joining us. He's a spokesperson of the Congress. Mr. Singh, what is your reaction? The Congress there leading those protests outside the Herald House.
Number one, the raid is an attack against India's principal opposition, and the raid is because the opposition has been questioning the government in a democracy, which they do not like. The raid reeks of vendetta. And we haven't been able to understand why do these raids only happen against innocent people and not the real perpetrators like Mr. Malia, Mr. Choksi, Mr. Nirav Modi, who have, and the government has not just, not nabbed them. They have waived their loans, and that to the tune of 60,000 crores with regards to Vijay Malia. Number two, why is the conviction rate of the ED less than 0.5%? Simply because there is no substance to it, and simply because there are too many false implications that are happening. And number three, why is there not even a single BJP leader who has an ED case pending against him? However, according to Association of Democratic Reforms, they have around 30% of their elected MPs, MLAs who have serious criminal cases pending against women. And number four, all the opposition leaders, parties, especially, Mr. Sharad Pawar, M.K. Stalin, Mamata Banerjee's nephew, Sheikh Banerjee, Mr. Channi, Mr. Kejriwal, all opposition parties have been targeted through ED. However, the BJP party, there's not one ED case. And second, I don't understand if the BJP has a different kind of surf excel, that does away with the stains of ED and IT cases, because Mr. Captain Amarinder Singh, who has recently formed an alliance with the BJP, had IT-ED cases pending against him. And if the BJP is so, anti-corruption and all that, why did they have an alliance with him in the first place? And why was he even a candidate for the VP, for the BJP?
Right.
So BJP, has basically been targeting Congress for simply having spoken for the people of India, and we'll keep doing that no matter what. We have faith in judiciary.